making your vote count. Traditionally, black voters are among the least likely to vote by mail, but there are signs of change as the coronavirus casts a shadow over this year's election.
Voting by mail is definitely secure and safe,
but possibly problematic with thousands of ballots thrown out because of avoidable errors. Tonight, we will run down the do's and don'ts of voting by mail, voting early, and casting your ballot in person. And we will give you some tips on what to do if you run into problems. Plus, we will look at what's at stake for South Florida voters, aside from choosing who will live in the White House. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NBC6 Voices. I am Jawan Strader. We are streaming right now on Facebook and on our NBC6 YouTube pages. Thank you so much for joining us. This is very, very important. You know why? Because it's that time to vote. And people are already voting as we speak. It's already underway for the 2020 election. And making your vote count is what this is all about. We want to make sure you have all the information you need and also that you feel confident knowing that your vote will count, and make sure that you don't make some of the common mistakes that are often made when casting your vote. So remember, Election Day is less than a month away, but voting is already underway in some areas. So let's get underway. This year, how you vote is almost as important as who you choose to elect. Florida saw a sharp increase in mail-in voting during the August primary as voters prioritized voting safely during the pandemic. But thousands of mail-in ballots went unaccounted for, and a majority of black voters in battleground states, including Florida, don't have confidence in voting by mail and feel voting in person makes a strong statement following the historic denial of the black vote in the United States. So if you are going to vote by mail, how you can make sure your ballot is successfully counted. And with so much misinformation out there, we want to bring you the facts. That's what this is all about. So please welcome, joining us is Patricia Brigham. She is the president of the Florida League of Women Voters. She is tuning in right now. There she is, Patricia. Thank you so much for joining us, Patricia.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And this is really an important time. So let's get right to it. Is voting by mail safe in your opinion?
Yes, it is. In fact, the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU has looked into this and have found that the voter fraud by mail is an infinitesimally small amount. It's not typical, and despite of what our president is saying about vote by mail, although he's not saying that about Florida, vote by mail is a safe and secure method, and millions and millions of voters are turning to it, and we're turning to it before COVID-19.
Okay, I want to ask you before we continue this, as far as voter registration is concerned, there was an issue recently here in the state of Florida. The website got jammed up. People thought it was hacked. Then the state came in and they gave people another day to register to vote. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, on the last day of voter registration, about the last 7 hours of that day, the online system that state of Florida provides crashed. And that was, to say the least, not a good situation for Floridians who were trying to access it to register to vote. And many of our citizens, of course, do not want to go outside or into a space where they couldn't feel safely distanced because of COVID-19. So we had been sending people to online platforms to register to vote. And so when this crashed, we immediately sprung into action, the league and a number of our partners in the voting rights space, and began testing the system, calling the hotline for election protection, calling the Secretary of State's office saying, we've got a problem. And at some point on Twitter, the secretary announced the problem was fixed, but it was not. I kept checking the system, and at 10:30 at night, it hadn't been fixed. So the governor announced yesterday that he extended the voter registration deadline by 7 hours, because that's the number of hours he believed that the system was down. So that registration extension happened until last night at 7 o'clock.
Okay, very, very good. And that's good to know. And let's talk about the mail-in ballots. Let's go back to that. And let's talk about what folks need to know first about those ballots? What do you want them to know?
Well, we want people to know that they need to request their ballots. If they haven't already requested your vote by mail ballot, please do so now. Please request your vote by mail ballot, because when you receive it, you have the option to either vote by mail, go to an early vote center and use their secure drop box or the supervisor of elections secure drop box and stick it in there, or wait. We have traditionalists who want to vote on election day because of the excitement of election day, and we certainly understand that. Go to the polling place, please wear a mask, take your own blue or black point ink pen, and vote. The main thing is vote. Be safe and vote. You can vote from the safety of your home if you're leery about still going outside because of the coronavirus. But if you do choose to vote by mail, we are encouraging voters strongly to get their ballot into the mailbox by October the 13th. That is not an official date. That is our recommended date, because we know that the mail has experienced slowdowns due to the U.S. Postal Service. So we're recommending 3 weeks ahead, but certainly don't wait any more than 2 weeks ahead. If you do, you need to take your ballot. Make sure you sign that envelope after you and seal it. Take your ballot to an early vote center or a drop box and vote that way. Yes, that's
okay. Okay. Yeah, Patricia, the reason why I'm kind of chuckling here is because it's a common mistake that's often made. We had more than 31,000 votes not counted because of common mistakes that are made, like bad signatures,
Yes.
no signature at all, and arriving after election day. So I want you to talk about these common mistakes and what folks need to make sure that they do.
And I'm very happy to do that. Those are all excellent concerns. First of all, as I mentioned, don't forget to sign the envelope if you're voting by mail or you're putting it into a secure drop box, that ballot. Critical. You've got to sign that. Also, as we age, our signatures change. Young people, as they move from their teens into their later 20s, their signatures change. And older people, as they age, their signatures change. So if you haven't checked your signature that's online with the supervisor of elections, it's usually the signature on your driver's license, you please make sure to do that and make sure that you have a correct match between your signature that's on the ballot and the supervisor of elections signature that's on record. We also recommend that if you're going to vote early, in person, make sure you vote early when early vote starts. And that the reason for that is because we know we're going to see an historic turnout at the polls this year. There's no question about it. We already saw a huge number of vote by mail ballots go out in the primary. So we don't want there to be any bottlenecks at the early vote sites. We don't want there to be any long lines. We want you to vote early, whether it be early voting or vote by mail. It's critical.
It is very, very critical. And then one other thing here is, how do I know if my vote counted, my ballot that I mailed in? How do I know?
Excellent question. It's so easy to track your ballot. Once you mail that ballot, give it a few days and then go on to your supervisor of elections website. You'll put in your address and your name, and you can track to see that your ballot has been received. It is as simple as that. Take responsibility for your vote, because your vote is your power as an American citizen.
It sure is. And I have to ask you one last question before I have to let you go. I want to ask you, what did you do? What have you done as far as voting? Have you voted yet? And how do you plan on voting this year?
Well, in the primary, I voted by mail. And in this upcoming general election, I have already filled out my ballot, as has my husband. And on Friday, we are going to drive over to the supervisor of elections office, and drop our ballots into that secure drop box.
Very, very good. Well, words of wisdom, Patricia. We really appreciate you. And thank you so much for that information. It is really important, as many people continue to question the validity of mail-in ballots. But I think now people are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable about doing so, whether it's mail-in or in person. And most importantly, they know to take charge. So, Patricia, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you.
It was a pleasure. Vote.
It is your power. It is your right. vote. You heard it from Patricia right there. Okay. Well, we know that some people out there feel a little bit more comfortable about voting in person. So if you do, you may see representatives from the Dream Defenders there. And Darnell Joseph is part of the organization in Broward. We want to welcome Darnell Joseph to the show here tonight. Darnell is tuning in, and there he is right there. Darnell, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you. What's that?
I said, thank you for having me.
Oh, man, absolutely. Thank you for joining us, man. Well, Darnell, I wanted to ask you, how is the Dream Defenders helping to make sure that people get out to vote?
Well, our entire organization throughout the state of Florida, all of our chapters all the way up from Tallahassee down to Miami, are going ahead and having us go out and phone bank to people to go ahead and let them know, hey, do you know what's on your ballot? What's going on? Do you have a voting plan to go ahead and do so? Because we know voting is extremely important during this time. And we want to make sure that people have the facts, right? When you're informed, you're able to go ahead and make better decisions regarding you and your community. So that's going to be our main commitment, to go ahead and have that commitment to vote and reach out to our folks within our communities to be like, hey, if you're a registered Democrat and you have a plan to do so, please go and vote.
And Darnell, I have to ask you this, because with the protests that basically happened after the death of George Floyd, a lot of people taken to the streets, Black Lives Matter and everything else. But have you been able to talk to some of these protesters and find out whether or not they are going to vote? Because to me, if you've been protesting in the streets, you need to make sure that your voice is heard. Otherwise, it's been all for nothing.
Yeah, as far as the people who we do organize with, there are definitely differing opinions as far as how we go ahead and we get to where we need to. A lot of the people that I do know are going to vote, and then others are skeptical of the voting process for the same reason that we've mentioned before, as far as voter suppression and is voting by mail even safe, or is my vote really going to go ahead and count? I really don't go ahead and judge them too much as far as like their process when they're thinking about if they're going to go ahead and vote, but just go ahead and giving them all the facts as far as like, well, if you're registered, you have the option to go ahead and do so. Me personally, as my take on it, is that I have the opportunity to go ahead and shift the needle to where I think is going to be the best opportunity for me and my people to go ahead and live a great life and have better well-being for my community. So my responsibility is going to go ahead and be to vote. But a lot of us are going ahead and being active regarding voting and getting the word out to people.
But Darnell, I'm sorry to cut you off. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from those that did protest? What are you hearing from people that you've spoken to, like yourself, especially young people like yourself?
A lot of people are discouraged with everything that's going on currently. And because of that discouragement, you do see actually a bigger uptick within people wanting to go get involved within these organizations that, like United We Dream, March for Our Lives, and the Sunrise Movement, that are directly impacted with or involved with the consequences and organizations that they want to go ahead and work with, right? And the causes they want to go ahead and see for changes within the United States. So it's a differing opinion, right? But like a lot of more people that I've been seeing that have been contacting us like, hey, I really want to go ahead and get involved with Dream Defenders because I see what you all are doing and I'm kind of tired of everything that's going on. And I want to go ahead and make a change too. And how do we do that?
But are they going to vote? Yeah. Are they going to vote, Darnell?
100%. Well, for those who we go ahead and we talk to that are phone banking, yes. As far as like those within our community, there are people who may choose not to, right? It's not going to go ahead and be our responsibility to go ahead and force them to the polls, but we want to go ahead and make sure everybody has proper information to get them there.
And then, Darnell, I wanted to ask you the voter suppressions that you're looking for once you are trying to help folks vote. What are you looking for in regards to helping some of those people?
Well, we have commitments to go ahead and be out at the actual polling places to pass out PPE to our people in our community, as well as water, because as you've seen previously for the primaries, lines can get extremely long. People are dehydrated and not going to be in the best health as they're going to go ahead and stand there the entire time. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that people know of our presence, that we're there for them, going in and providing things that they may need to go ahead and get them through the process, as well as going ahead and giving out voting guides. That way people know the facts if they haven't had the chance to research everything that may be on their ballot on the day of, if they do go out and decide to vote.
And Darnell, are you pushing people to try to go and vote in person? Because as we started the show, we talked about how more Black people feel a little bit more empowered to do so and do so in person because of the history involving Black people, people of color, and voting.
Mm-hmm. We definitely do take considerations of COVID into these conversations that we have with people. If for those who do feel comfortable enough to go ahead and vote and have chosen to do so, we just support them in the way that we let them know, hey, like, we're going to go ahead and be there and you'll be out there to see us. Nothing is going to go ahead and stop us from getting our voice out there. For those who do have bigger concerns regarding COVID and just being outside with all the messages of intimidation that may be going on or things that they might see, and be more comfortable with voting by mail, we are, as phone bakers, are going to go ahead and be out there on the phone saying, hey, if you are voting by mail, you need to do so early and make sure that you get it out there in time and check our supervisor of elections office so that you can see that your voice counted.
And Darnell, has it been a challenge, or are you seeing more of an uptick as far as people wanting to vote this year? What are you seeing? Because you heard from Patricia before you started speaking and talking about this issue. She was talking about we're going to see historic numbers this year. Are you seeing that?
Yes, especially for the primary elections, there was a huge number of people who went ahead and voted by mail for the Democratic race to go ahead and have a candidate out there that represented the concerns of our community. And just seeing that alone and the numbers that were out there, as far as it paling in comparison to people who actually went to the polls, I was extremely excited to know that people were actually still going ahead and going through with the process, even with all the craziness that's happening right now in this country, especially in Florida.
All right, Darnell Joseph, thank you so much. You and the Dream Defenders for all you do in our communities across the state, and especially here across South Florida. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you got it. Go out and vote. All right, well, moving on right now, we're going to talk about the issues on the ballots because there are a number of issues. Of course, we know about the race for the White House. We know about the race for the White House and the presidential election, but there's so many other issues that are going to impact you as well. Those issues are on the ballot, but what are they? What should you know about them? Well, we have a little expert here joining us, happens to be a friend of mine as well. So please welcome Marlon Hill. He is a Miami business lawyer. There he is, my man right there. He's a strategist, past president of the Caribbean Bar Association and a recent county commission candidate for District 9. He's also a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. My frat brother. Oh, don't tell anybody, though. Don't tell anybody. Marlon Hill, welcome to the show.
Having me. Thank you for having me, my brother Strader. How's it going?
Oh, man, it's going well, brother. It's going well. It's good to see you still very active, too.
Less than 30
What'd you say?
Less than 30 days to go to this election.
Yes, it is. Less than 30 days ago. That's why this is so important that we encourage people to get out and vote. But we also need to talk about a number of issues that are on the ballot, Marlon, because we have to get into specifics here because a lot of people aren't familiar with that. And so some people tend to ignore these issues. We want to make sure you don't ignore some of these issues that are on the ballot. So let's talk about that because this year's ballot is a few pages long. So the emphasis is on the race, of course, for the White House, but there are many other important issues impacting you here in the state of Florida. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk quickly about the constitutional amendments. You are an attorney, so I know you're very up to speed on some of these things. So tell our viewers, first of all, why they should care about Amendment 1, which deals with who has the right to vote. Why should they care about that?
Well, first and foremost, Jawan, we have 15 million registered voters in the state of Florida, and probably more from the extended registration date from Monday. 13% of those voters are Black voters, 16% are Hispanic, and many are new voters or even recent citizens or returning citizens who served their time, and they're just voting for the first time. It's very important. The ballot is going to be about 4 to 5 pages, depending on where you live. Right, front and back. Make sure you pay attention to pages of the ballot. right? You can get the ballot in English, you can get the ballot in Spanish, you can get the ballot in Creole, depending on where you live as well. And some people talk about the top of the ballot to the bottom of the ballot. I'd like to talk about it, the bottom of the ballot to the top, right? Because you are going to see things on your ballots like charter amendments that may be for the particular city that you live in. You know, Sunrise or Lauderhill may have specific amendments. Then you're going to have the state constitutional amendments. The state constitutional amendments is where folks try to get different policies to change the state constitution. You can have an amendment on the constitution by getting, you can do it if you wanted to put an amendment to the constitution yourself, but you have to get 8% of voters to sign a petition to put the amendment on the ballot. In the last election, Joanne, in 2012, there were, I think it was about 12 amendments. This time it's only 6 that are on the ballot. And it goes from the first one that you talked about, Constitution Amendment number 1, that is trying to underscore the fact that only citizens, U.S. citizens can vote. That's already law. So they're just changing the word only to every. That's the only thing that they're doing. And this is something just to kind of understand.
But why is that important? Well, hold on. Let's go back to that. Why is that important? Why is only to every changing a word important that it needs to be changed in the Constitution? Just kind of explain that, break that down, because it could be important.
Well, it's already important. You know, we already know that U.S. citizens are the only persons that can vote. This amendment is only brought by a group called, it's a citizen requirement to vote. You know, they call themselves the Florida Citizen Voters. It's a group funded by Mr. John Luden, and they just want to make sure that everyone knows that only U.S. citizens can vote. It's really unnecessary because everyone already knows that. 18 years old, you're able to vote, you should be able to vote.
Okay, very good point. Now, I want to talk about, before we go on into what's on the ballot, let's talk about why this election is so important. Talk about that for all the voters out there, potential voters. Let them know what's at stake here.
You know, Jawan, every election is important, actually, in my opinion. Whether it's a local election, whether it's a primary election, the general election draws more attention because of the presidential race. The general election has a higher turnout. In the last general election, the turnout was 70%, 72% thereabouts statewide. In 2012, the turnout was only 67%. The supervisory elections in Broward and Miami-Dade and Palm Beach, they're estimating the turnout is going to be about 75 to 80%. The reason why it's so important is that there are so many key races that are being decided. Local races, state attorney, public defender, school board races, the state leadership, state senate, state houses, and then you also have the retention of judges, and then you have congressional races. So it's a very important ballot. These persons make decisions on policy. There are 2 things government does, Joanne: policy and passing a budget to execute what people care about, right? And there's a difference between having a voice and having a say. If you don't vote, you don't have a say in the budget. You don't have a say in the policy. More healthcare, less healthcare. More support for small businesses or less support for small businesses. More COVID CARES Act monies or no COVID CARES Act monies. If you don't vote, then you don't have a say in whether or not that happens or not.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. And where can people out there watching right now, if I want to research candidates, where can I go research those candidates that are on the ballot?
You know, Patricia, and earlier in the program, Vote 411 is a great website. You can research the candidates and also hear about the constitutional amendments. There's 6 constitutional amendments, one having to do with citizenship, the second one having to do with raising the minimum wage. The third amendment having to do with whether or not we're going to have open primaries as opposed to closed primaries. Right now we have closed primaries, and right now the amendment is say that anyone, if you're registered as an independent, you'll be able to have a say in the primary, as we just had in August. Amendment number 4 has to do with putting the amendments on twice, because right now the amendments only pass, Joanne, if 60% of us say yes. And that's a big number. They want this amendment on number 4 is saying, put it on twice. You have to vote twice to say yes, making it more difficult to pass an amendment.
Oh my goodness.
And the last 2,
my goodness.
The last 2 have to do with tax benefits on homestead exemption and a tax exemption for spouses of deceased veterans. And you can decide whether or not that's good for you or not. It just means less money on the tax rolls.
Okay, now I want to go back to something you just mentioned as far as the importance of voting and some of the issues that are on the ballots, because my wife and I, we talk about this because she kind of hit me to it, and I really think about it. Probably the most important thing on the ballot, everything is important, but judges, we tend to forget that. Some of us even overlook it. We don't vote because I don't know anything about that judge. It's not important. I'm not going to vote. It's probably the most important thing on the ballot because they are the ones that decide the laws.
Absolutely.
So talk about that.
You know, you're more likely to be in front of a judge than you are to have a meeting with the governor or a meeting with the president to talk about an issue or solving an issue. In the primary, we had the chance to vote on several judges in the South Florida area, county judges, circuit court judges. If a judge is not appointed by the governor through the nominating commission process, then the citizens get a chance to vote on these judges. And it's very important. For this general election, we get to decide yes or no whether or not the appellate court judges or the Supreme Court judges are retained, yes or no. It's not, I'm voting for this person against this person for judges. But these judges make consequential decisions on issues that they interpret under the law, whether or not a particular law is unconstitutional or not, or having to do with a dispute that may be occurring from a particular city or county. Big decisions. But the governor holds quite a bit of power in appointing these persons to the court. If we say no to any particular judge on this general election ballot, then the governor may just appoint someone else that comes up from the nominating process. So, but you should still evaluate who are these persons, what kind of opinions are they writing on a particular law. Even with the Supreme Court now, we're evaluating whether or not Amy Coney Barrett, how she feels on certain issues. In the same way, you should be evaluating these local judges in the same way objectively. But the bottom line is, do your research, guys. You know, talk to your family members, call a friend who's an attorney to learn more about the judges. Call different organizations, even ones that you're not associated with, so that you can fill out your ballot. You can vote today, right now, by mail. You don't have to wait to deliver it in person. I'm voting by mail, Jawan, because I'm testing out the mail system. I want to see how long it's going to take for them to receive my ballot. My ballot came on Saturday morning. I filled it out on Sunday. I dropped it in the mail on Monday. I'm waiting right now to check online whether or not my ballot is received and processed.
Very, very. You know what? I was going to ask you. That was one of my next questions, too. I was going to ask you about what you decided to do, vote in person or vote by mail. So that's very, very good to know. Now, I want to ask you about the impact on Black communities, everything that we just talked about, and talk about the importance of some of these issues on the Black communities.
They're very important. You know, we are 13% of the registered voter population and increasingly diverse. You know, the Black community is being driven by persons of Jamaican descent, Haitian descent, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Brazil. You know, we are very, very diverse, multicultural community. And these issues of economic opportunity is going to be on the ballot. Issues of access to affordable health care is on the ballot. Issues of social justice and the relationship with our law enforcement is going to be on the ballot. However you view it, and based on the candidates' policies. These policies, two things again, policies and budget. Who's making the policies and the laws, and who's finding the money to do it? And the Black community is a significant part of our South Florida population and our state's population. And the turnout of this community could in fact tip the scales for the fight for 29 electoral votes. We're going to hear the debate tonight with a person of color, a woman of color on the debate stage, and her impact on the race. And we're going to have to, just like anyone else, evaluate her and evaluate Vice President Pence as to how they feel about where they want to take the country for the next 4 years coming out of this COVID-19 period.
Very good point. Marlon Hill, thank you so much for joining us. I always tell people, like you said, do your research. And we would usually fill out the forms before we even head to the polls. So that way I already have everybody that I'm voting for. I don't have to sit in the voting booth and sit there and try to research everything. I have all that research done before I even get to the poll. So I just Boom, I know exactly who I'm voting for, aside from president and aside from some of the other high profile spots. So that information is very valuable. And again, tell folks where they can go for research and for information.
First and foremost, check your voter status. Make sure that your voter registration is up to date. Your address. Make sure that your signature is up to date to make sure, because a friend of mine, he had a stroke. Now he can't sign in the same way. So update your signature. Now he can sign with an X, right? My friend's cousin did that recently. So check your voter status. Go to your supervisor of elections. Download the sample ballot. Do your research at vote411.org. Get your objective information. Check out the endorsements from different organizations in the newspapers, and then find out where you're going to vote. Are you going to vote early? That's your choice. Do what makes you comfortable and gives you peace of mind. But at the end of the day, if you don't vote, you don't have a say.
All right, Marlon Hill, you heard it right there. If you don't vote, you do not have a say. Marlon Hill, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, my brother. Appreciate you.
You got it. And everyone, we want to leave you with some resources and information out there, as we always like to do at the end of this show, that you can always go to. If you have any questions or information, just go to our website. You see all the information right there. Just go to NBC6.com to make sure that you are informed and prepared before you cast your ballot. For everything you need to know about the upcoming election, including local races, issues on the ballot, the latest on the presidential race, polling locations, and much more, just search Decision 2020 at NBC6.com. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, also on Twitter as well at Jawan NBC6. You can follow me. Let me know what you thought about the show. Just check me out. Send me a tweet. Let me know. Let me know if you disliked it or not. Anyway, most important, we want to make sure that you get out there and you vote. Remember, it's the most powerful voice that you have. And most importantly, remember, education is the key to success. If you believe, you will succeed. Thank you so much for joining us on NBC6 Voices. Until next time, have a great evening.